November 4th, 1980. The election was over. And just like that, so was Jimmy Carter. A one-term president. He hadn't lied. He hadn't cheated. He hadn't slept with interns or porn stars. His son wasn't trading his last name for corporate board seats. He'd simply told people the truth, and truth doesn't trend when everyone wants a miracle. America in 1980 was exhausted. Oil shocks. Inflation. The ghost of Vietnam. 52 hostages trapped in Tehran, their faces looped on the nightly news like a national wound. Carter called it a crisis of confidence. And voters called it depressing. They didn't want sermons. They wanted cinema. And Ronald Reagan arrived with the perfect script. The grin, the music, the story America wanted to hear again. He didn't invent political theater. He just gave it Hollywood lighting. While Carter talked about sacrifice, Reagan promised mourning in America. One sounded like homework, the other like hope. While Mandela brought together divided people, Carter diligently led people to serve. Placed side by side, Carter's cardigan looked less like leadership and more like laundry day. He told Americans to turn down the thermostat. They wanted someone who could turn up the vibe. He was decades ahead of his time, preaching sustainability before it was cool, asking for humility before social media made humility a prop. But the world wasn't ready for a president who looked like the maintenance man of democracy. When the confetti fell and Reagan took the oath, Carter smiled, shook hands, did everything a gentleman does when the crowd is cheering for someone else. He didn't hate Reagan. He just didn't recognize the new game. Politics had shifted from governing to performing, and in that transformation, from policy to personality, Carter became the last honest man at the world's biggest talent show. While Reagan rehearsed lines, Carter read psalms. While Reagan's campaign sold optimism like popcorn, Carter still believed in effort, sweat, and grace. He was the final act of an older generation, the ones who built before they branded. Today, we live in the opposite world. Followers are votes. Attention is currency. Politics is influencer culture with better suits. Back then, Carter's honesty tanked his approval ratings. Today, that same honesty wouldn't even make it past the algorithm. So when his limo pulled away from the White House gates, there were no tears, no entourage. Just Rosalind beside him, heading south, home to Plains, Georgia. No bitterness. No sponsors. No Jimmy Carter masterclass in humility, now streaming. Just silence. And a question that would haunt him for years. What now? But that's the thing about Jimmy Carter. He was never finished. He just changed tools. Instead of power, he picked up purpose. Instead of speeches, a hammer. And while no one knew it yet, that hammer would swing thousands of times, long after his rivals were gone from the headlines. Later, we'll see him in New York, climbing a staircase the city had given up on. Later still, in Malawi, sweating beside villagers, proving that faith doesn't need microphones. Reagan gave America a show to believe in. Carter gave it something to build on. One built confidence, the other built conscience. One moved markets, the other moved furniture. So while talk shows cracked jokes about peanuts and sweaters, Jimmy Carter went home, rolled up his sleeves, and prepared to prove in wood, nails, and sweat that sometimes the quiet man finishes the loud man's story. Because power fades, but purpose echoes, and soon the whole world would hear his hammer. It started, like most turning points, with a phone call, a neighbor's voice, thick Georgia drawl. "Mr. President, I'm talking to you as a neighbor, Millard Fuller." Founder of a small outfit hardly anyone had heard of, Habitat for Humanity. He didn't bring a donor list or a PR plan, just conviction. And one question: are you interested or very interested? Carter laughed. He'd barely unpacked his boxes. But that quiet yes would pull him out of retirement and into the longest volunteer shift in presidential history. Meanwhile, America had moved on. Cable news was learning how to argue. Talk shows were discovering villains. Politics had found its new fuel, attention. Instead of debates, there were ratings. Instead of policy, punchlines. Every candidate rehearsed like a late-night host. Carter still believed humility was electable. Today, humility wouldn't survive the primaries. He said yes anyway. A small yes, polite, unviral, algorithm-proof. A yes you could miss if you blinked, but that yes would echo across 40 years of Thursdays. Soon, he was back in Americus, Georgia. No motorcade, no helicopter, just a pickup, a prayer, and the first plank of timber he'd lift for someone else's dream. At first, it looked symbolic. A feel-good cameo. Shake a few hands, swing a ceremonial hammer, disappear back into history. But that's not what happened. He kept showing up, every weekend, every build. He didn't delegate, he dug. He measured, sawed, and hammered beside plumbers, teachers, grandmothers, and kids who thought foreign policy was a phone app. Somewhere between the sweat and the sawdust, Jimmy Carter became Jimmy Carter again. Back in Washington, politicians learned a new craft, monetizing virtue. Failure was now a business model. The more divided the country became, the more expensive the speaking fees got. Carter left office poorer than he entered. Imagine that today. He liked to joke, "I'm the only ex-president who still flies commercial." These days, most of them own the planes. He and Rosalind built quietly. Where Jimmy swung hammers, she painted, sanded, organized lunches. They became the first couple in American history whose love language was manual labor. In an age of photo ops, they created none. When others staged charity for cameras, Carter's charity didn't even own a camera. Flash forward to today, our generation live streams generosity. We film ourselves handing out sandwiches, we hashtag empathy, we upload compassion in 4K. Carter just turned up. No selfie, no sponsor, no script. He proved what every grandparent already knows. You don't have to film virtue for it to be real. By 1984, word reached him of a project in New York, a 6-story building burned out by neglect. Rats. Rubble. Hope long gone. Perfect, Carter thought. That trip would change everything, not just for the families who'd live there, but for how the world would remember him. When the press finally found him again, they expected a handshake, a soundbite, a staged photo. Instead, they found a former president covered in dust, laughing with volunteers, refusing interviews. And they remembered what America had forgotten since 1981, that sometimes the quietest man in the room is still the one changing it. Later, we'll see him on that New York rooftop, looking out at Wall Street's glass towers, saying softly, "In the richest city, in the richest country on earth," and letting the skyline finish the sentence, because this wasn't a comeback. It was a reconstruction of homes, of hope, and of the meaning of service. April 1984. New York smelled of ambition, exhaust, and burnt coffee. The papers were full of Wall Street miracles and political melodramas, and into all that noise rolled a gray Trailways bus from Georgia. Inside were 30 volunteers, a few church carpenters, and one former president of the United States, Jimmy Carter. 59 years old, carrying a hammer instead of a headline. The Secret Service looked horrified. The press looked confused. The locals thought it was a stunt. The project was Mascot Flats, a 6-story skeleton on East 6th Street. No elevators, no plumbing, no hope. Perfect, Carter thought. Downtown, bankers discovered junk bonds. Uptown, politicians discovered cable news. America was roaring again, but not here. Here, kids played in rubble. Here, grandmothers slept in coats. Here, a president picked up a paintbrush. Reporters expected theater, a handshake, a nail, a smile. Instead, they found him in denim, already working. Before New York, before the White House, before the hammer. Jimmy Carter grew up in Plains, Georgia, population 600. His father, a strict businessman. His mother, a nurse who treated black neighbors when segregation said not to. He was raised in the church, taught that faith wasn't about Sunday attendance, but daily service. He studied nuclear engineering, served in the Navy, could have lived out life as a quiet Southern farmer. But every step, the discipline, the service, the humility, built a foundation no scandal could crack. He didn't chase power, he stumbled into it. Because even as a young man, Carter believed the purpose of leadership wasn't to impress, it was to improve. He ran for governor, then president, without family fortune, media machine, or Manhattan donor list. He won not by promise, but by principle. And that's why his post-presidency feels different. He didn't lose power, he simply returned to where it came from. Back to 1984. Carter was the same man, just older, poorer, freer. And with every nail he hammered, he was rebuilding something America didn't know it had lost, its conscience. By the second hour, photographers put down their lenses and picked up hammers. By sunset, everyone was sweating, laughing at it, wondering how the man once mocked as too soft for Washington had become the toughest worker on site. At night, Carter slept in a church bunk near Port Authority. No hotel suite, just a mattress, a sandwich, and 40 strangers snoring. Next morning, he was up first. Coffee, prayer, lumber, repeat. When volunteers slowed, Carter kept pace. When journalists asked for quotes, he waved them off. Let's finish the roof first. Back in Washington, power performed as usual. Speeches, budgets, backroom deals. But on East 6th Street, a different kind of leadership was trending. No slogans, just service. A few decades later, politicians would hammer one nail for a photo and call it a day of service. Carter stayed all week. From the rooftop, he saw glass towers to the north, Wall Street to the south, and below, an elderly woman cooking breakfast over an open fire. He talked about that view for the rest of his life. In the richest city, in the richest country on earth. The skyline finished the sentence. By week's end, the headline read simply, Carter still working. Simple, true, powerful. Letters poured in, donations, volunteers, checks that said, if President Carter can build a house, so can I. While Reagan's America built skyscrapers of profit, Carter built staircases of purpose. While CEOs traded millions in minutes, he traded sweat for shelter. And if Mandela rebuilt a nation's soul from the ashes of hate, Carter rebuilt its heart from the dust of neglect. Two men, two continents, one idea that greatness begins when applause ends. Today, billionaires build rockets. Carter built roofs. One reached for Mars, the other reached for his neighbor. And somehow, between the steel and the sawdust, Jimmy Carter became what every modern politician pretends to be, a servant. The letters kept coming. Thousands of them. From plumbers, teachers, millionaires, monks, people who'd never even voted for him, all wanting to help. Out of those envelopes came an idea, the Carter Work Project. Every year, a new build. A new skyline patched with hope instead of billboards. While other ex-presidents built libraries, temples to their own memory, Carter built worksites. His library smelled of sawdust and sunscreen. No tickets, no ego, just a hammer waiting by the door. He and Rosalind traveled like missionaries with tool belts. Mexico, Zambia, Canada, South Korea, sometimes 100 homes in a week, sometimes just one, but always finished. But the hammer wasn't his only tool. In 1982, he founded the Carter Center to fix what nails couldn't: elections, diseases, diplomacy. While Reagan sold optimism to Wall Street, Carter was buying hope for people with nothing left to sell. While Trump stamped his name on towers, Carter printed his on blueprints. While Biden spoke of empathy, Carter had been practicing it for 40 years, with a paint roller. By 2015, the Carter Center had nearly wiped out guinea worm disease, millions of cases, down to a handful. That's not politics. That's stewardship. Mandela fought injustice with forgiveness. Carter fought despair with duty. Different continents, same courage. Proof that service is louder than vengeance. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. While others used awards to raise speaking fees, Carter used his to raise walls for the poor. He talked about habitat, poverty, and peace as daily habit, not ceremony. The cameras wanted drama. He gave them decency. While Reagan mastered television, Carter mastered tenacity. While Mandela spoke truth to power, Carter spoke kindness to indifference. Both men proved the same thing: strength delivered quietly lasts longer. And while the world argued about who was making America great again, Jimmy Carter was too busy making housing affordable again. The Carter Center grew into a quiet superpower of compassion. It monitored elections in over 100 countries, negotiated ceasefires, trained doctors who'd never even heard of him. No fanfare, no photo ops, just outcomes. Compare that to today, where leaders film every handshake and post every act of kindness like it's a commercial break. Carter didn't live-stream virtue. He lived it. From that burned-out tenement in New York, to clinics in Ethiopia, to mosquito nets in South Sudan, his hammer became a passport. While Silicon Valley preached move fast and break things, Carter moved slowly and fixed them. While billionaires built rockets to escape Earth, Carter built roofs so more people could survive on it. He never built an empire. He built trust. And in a century, drowning in spin, that may be the rarest material left. So when people call him the nicest failure in history, they miss the point. He didn't fail. He just changed definitions. If Mandela rebuilt a nation from the ashes of hate, Carter rebuilt neighborhoods from the dust of neglect. One conquered bitterness, the other conquered vanity. Both lost power, but never purpose. Both proved that service, quiet, ordinary, relentless, is still the highest office on earth. And while today's leaders trade empathy for engagement metrics, somewhere in Georgia, an old man still swings a hammer, proving that the truest legacy isn't written in law or light, but in lumber. Time never rushed Jimmy Carter. It just kept trying to catch him. Even as the years stacked up like lumber, he kept working into his 80s, his 90s, and somehow his hundreds. The hair turned white. The walk slowed. But the grip, that hammer grip, never left. Meanwhile, politics became full-blown entertainment. Reagan had brought Hollywood to politics. Trump turned politics into Hollywood. Biden tried to turn the volume down, but by then, the microphones had become megaphones. Every opinion was a brand. Every scandal, a season finale. Through it all, Carter just kept building. When the headlines shouted, he whispered. When the crowds divided, he gathered. When others built walls, he built porches. He didn't tweet sermons, he lived them. Volunteers from every continent came to swing a hammer beside him. They called it Working with Jimmy. He called it Thursday. At 92, he was still there, paint splattered, sunburned, pausing only to wipe sweat from Rosalind's brow. Then came the falls, the fainting spells, the stitches. Doctors said, slow down. He smiled. They've been saying that since 1981. When Rosalind passed in 2023, he returned to church the very next week. Same pew. Same folded hands. After the service, a reporter asked, "Will you keep building?" He nodded. She'd be upset if I didn't. By then, he was the longest-lived president in American history and still the humblest. He celebrated his 100th birthday in the same small house in Plains, Georgia. No gates, no guards, just neighbors bringing casseroles. Outside, a volunteer raised a hammer and said, "For Jimmy." Because by now, the hammer wasn't just his tool, it was his symbol. It had outlasted his presidency, his critics, and nearly a century of noise. Every swing had been a prayer. Every house, a headline written in wood. Mandela changed the world by forgiving it. Carter changed it by fixing it. Mandela rebuilt a nation from the ashes of hate. Carter rebuilt neighborhoods from the dust of neglect. One conquered bitterness. The other conquered vanity. Both prove that service, quiet, ordinary, relentless, is still the highest office on earth. While Reagan gave America a dream to watch, Carter gave it a home to live in. While Trump mastered attention, Carter mastered integrity. While Biden preaches unity, Carter practiced it, one nail at a time. He never filled arenas. He filled living rooms. He never promised to change America. He just changed the street he was on. And here's the truth our generation can't escape, our grandparents built: we broadcast. They planted gardens we turned into Instagram backdrops. They fixed fences, we post slogans. They believed virtue was something you did, not something you displayed. Jimmy Carter was the last of them, the silent generation of faith, grit, and decency that worked quietly, while the rest of us learned to talk loudly. He never owned a yacht. He owned a toolbox. He didn't chase power. He stewarded purpose. And when history looked away, he kept hammering, proof that you don't need followers to lead. So if you ever drive through a quiet town one night and see a porch light glowing, think of him, the man the headlines once called the nicest failure in history. The man who proved that sometimes failure builds better foundations. Because long after the crowds have moved on, and the microphones are silent, you can still hear the soft rhythm of hammering. Steady. Humble. Unending. Echoing from Plains, Georgia. A sound older than politics, stronger than fame. A reminder that goodness doesn't trend, but it lasts. And maybe that's what he built best of all, not just homes, but the blueprint for how to be human again.